Welcome to Clarkston Memories. Clarkston Memories is a show that provides the history of Clarkston, helps people understand the roots of our beginning as a town and the people and the pioneers who lived here. And it's a pleasure. We have Dale Bond. Dale has been a long-time 53-year resident of the community, but besides that, Dale is very interested in history. He's a historian, he's a genealogist, and he's done a lot of research on the land that he lives on. He lives on Allen Road, the northwest corner of Independence Township, since 1963. And that property shows a lot of the remains of earlier times, fields with rock fences on the property and old barns. And we're going to just take a look at Dale's property and his barn. This house was built in 1889. A very sturdy house with the barn that was also built in 1889. And Dale's going to tell us a little bit about where did this property come from? Because there was always that first owner of the property.
Yes, of course.
And so Dale, kind of tell us about how this property came to be.
Okay, the very first owner was Matthew. Yes, here we go. Matthew Warner. Mm-hmm. And he bought the land in 1836, and then it was probably here before that, because the process of buying land is, he was from Genesee County, New York. Mm-hmm. So what they would do, they would buy a warrant.
And a warrant was from a war? Or?
No, the warrant was the first process of buying a piece of property. And that warrant allowed you to have that property.
Like a deed?
Yes.
Similar to a deed?
It wasn't like a deed, but you could sell that warrant.
Okay.
Now, many of the people of our first supposedly owners never came to this township. They sold those warrants before to someone else, perhaps in New York.
So they lived in New York and...
there was a land office in New York. Okay. And from that, now I should go back because a map was created in 1818 that showed the whole township. Now, here's what it was called. It was called Town 4 North, Range 9 East. Now, that's a definite position according to the way they laid out Michigan.
The surveying of Michigan.
Yeah, they created a baseline from east to west, and that baseline's at 42 degrees, 26 minutes, 30 minutes north of latitude. Mm-hmm. And then they also had a longitude of 84, 24, 24 longitude, split Michigan into two parts, left, east and west.
East and west, mm-hmm.
And from that, they had a grid, and they could call it, in other words, the upper left-hand corner would be town, it'd be listed on the east. Mm-hmm. See, we're town north, Town 4 North, and then the range is your left to right. Okay. And range 9 East would be that side of the meridian, and the other side would identify everything the other side. Okay. And then you also had north and south.
So it was almost, four quadrants of Michigan, not necessarily right in the middle.
Yeah, no, it's split in the center like this. Now, that is the way the first map describes where they did the survey. They didn't have an Oakland County, they didn't have an Independence County. All they had was known as, and the map says this, it's Town 4 North, Range 9 East. That's the map. Now, that's an important number because your tax records that's the way, if you look at your tax record, this is exactly what you'll find. That identifies where we are, and then they will say section that you're in.
Okay. No. So go back to Matthew Warner is in New York.
All right, he bought this. Now he had the opportunity to see that map. Mm-hmm. From that map, he would pick a piece he wanted to buy. Okay. If it was available, he put a warrant down, and that was his. And then he either showed up as a pioneer or he didn't. But anyway, Warner came here, but before he came here, he bought the next section from a person, a friend of his, who lived to him, that never came here. So Matt Warner had both Section 5 and Section 6. That's all the way to Reese Road, all the way to the other side of M15.
Okay.
Each section is 36, each section is a quarter mile.
Okay.
The whole township is 36 square miles, 6 by 6. And they're all numbered.
The sections within those, the 36 miles.
Right, so if you would go to your register of deeds, you could find out everything you want about your house by looking up what section you're in. It would have all the transactions of your property. Now in my case, I never got a hold of my abstract, and I wanted to know about my house. So I went to Register of Deeds and went through the book, and you can get all the Lieber numbers and the book numbers of all the deeds that have been sold. Well, that don't tell you an awful lot, it's just an index. But if you order those deeds, or you can either go down to the basement, you can look at it in a microfilm, but what's easier yet, you can order all those deeds real easy. You just tell the clerk you want a Lieber number and a book number. For $1 each, they will find them for you and mail them to you. Now you can create your home history.
Of your property.
Of your property. Now the reason that the deeds tell you a lot of things about people and other provisions of what happened.
Well, let's get started there and looking at, let's talk about the research, because the Northwest, we were part of the Northwest Territory,
Okay.
which was purchased by the U.S. government.
What it was, no, quite. Here's what happened. After the Revolutionary War, they confiscated all the Crown land. Before the Revolutionary War, all the land was owned by England, the Queen, and then they broke that down into lords. You paid him rent. Now you were given a big piece of land as they called Crown land, and there were huge plantations there. And then what they did after the war, the war, the U.S. confiscated all that land, put it up for auction, and you had to buy back your land or buy another piece of land, or...
Yeah. But Michigan was not really part of that at the
No,
point.
Michigan was part, that was part of the Louisiana Purchase. And what they did from...
France.
Well, from what I'm trying to say is, from the ordinance of 1785, they created the Michigan Territory, and they had supposed to be 5 states, but they didn't have exactly the boundaries defined because they hadn't surveyed it. So the first thing they did, they went and surveyed Ohio. Now, the thing with the Crown land, it wasn't laid out like they have it now. The ordinance said that all your land will be square, a mile square with 80 acres, 40, or whatever part of that you wanted to buy.
Section.
In the old Crown land, it was just a mishmash. It looked like a patchwork quilt.
Well, people hadn't really surveyed the West. I mean, there was some surveying going on in 1740. George Washington was doing some surveying.
This was all surveyed land, but it was so crude, they're very even tough to handle. In fact, they surveyed in what they called perches. Here we call them rods. But when they surveyed Michigan, they did it with chains and links. Now what they did, a chain was a certain length, and the links was part of that. They actually would go from a point of that chain, and then they would mark again. They did the complete surveying. All they had was a compass and a chain.
Well, talk about Harvey Park, because I know he's your favorite surveyor there.
Yeah, but wait, he's the next step. The very first survey was not Harvey Park. It was another fellow here who did the whole, like I say, that range, and he did it in 1818.
Okay.
And that gave them, then they could sell that land, okay? And, well, let's see. After they purchased a warrant, they could occupy the land. And then they bought that land, and like I say, they came over here.
That was in 1836?
Actually, it was before.
Okay.
Now, most of these people showed up before 1836. A lot of people never patented the land they even came on.
They just squatted?
No, they didn't squat, but they didn't need a patent. They might have sold their warrant. See, because I've seen warrants that didn't come for 30 years later. Now, if you get, that warrant is really giving you the right to occupy.
Well, okay. So talk about, so when did Harvey Park?
Okay, Harvey Park did not come in until about 1840.
Okay.
He surveyed Clarkston for the Clark brothers. He surveyed the town, and he surveyed it into lots.
Okay.
And which is section 20 is the town. And then he also surveyed the land north.
What we would call the Independence Township.
Yes, he did a lot. Mine, yeah, Harvey Park. Harvey Park was hired, and then what happened? They named Park Lake after him in town because
Well, he was an important person at the time.
Actually, he was involved with the Park Davis Company. He founded that later. Yeah.
So talk about, I know that there's some interesting things about the land in the chains and rods and that you found.
Well, what's interesting here, if you think of this, if you're going to have nothing but a camera, a compass and a chain, how do you go?
Where do you start?
Well, here's the thing. What if there's a big tree there? How do you get around that tree and know where to go? What they would do, they would have a witness tree. In other words, by trigonometry, they would find a tree over to the side, they'd get that angle, then they would go back and go the other way, and by triangulation, they were able to create a straight line.
Okay.
If they wanted to go through a pond or something, they didn't have to put a post in a pond, they could triangulate around it.
Okay.
Now that was very difficult. So what happened? Can you imagine how they can convert up and down hills to a straight line on a map?
And our hill, at this time in the 1830s, 1840s, all of this was a wooded area.
Oh, very wooded. And anyway, here's another thing I should mention. On that very first map, they described the soil on all the land. They described the trees for certain places. So people had an idea what they were buying.
And I understand we had a lot of rocks.
Many rocks.
I mean, so our land was rocky. Rocky.
Hilly and rocky. A lot of buyers didn't know all those details until they got here.
Okay. So Warner did come to Michigan, is that correct?
Yes. Now what he did, he settled on Section 6. He built a log cabin on Allen Road. That would be on the west side of Allen Road.
Okay.
And he built there, and he also had built orchards, and he had a nice farm, pretty good sized farm.
Okay.
He lived there until about 1854 when he was approached by Enos Church.
Okay. We have a letter. We have a letter with some quotes. Enos Church wrote to his mother, Elizabeth, and regarding the purchase of the property. Now, my understanding was at least some of that property was sold in 1844. That's on the east side of Allen Road, which is where your home is.
It was all part of the same person.
Okay.
Elizabeth bought everything that Warner had but one parcel.
Okay. Where he lived. So let's go back to the quotes and see, because this is an interesting letter from Enos, where it says, starting that you were anxious to trade the farm in Castile for the wild lands in Michigan, with a desire that some of us here should go and see the land in question. So Elizabeth Church lived in Castile, New York.
Yes.
And so she was really interested in coming here. She was a widow at the time. And there's more to the letter of Enos describing the lot on Section 5 is not a very good one. The lot on Section 6 is a very fair lot.
Well, Section 6 was a very flat lot. Section 5, where I live, is very hilly, rocky, and swampy.
Okay.
So that's not very good for farming.
And that yours one, you were 5, right? You were on 5.
I'm on 5.
Yeah.
So anyway, what they did when Elizabeth died, they split all her land into 5 parcels.
Okay, let's go back to the letter, because there's more to this letter.
Okay.
That letter that it says the lands in Michigan are very cheap. Improved lands are selling for $10 to $15 per acre, according to the location. I would assume was south of us, more towards Detroit, and the wild lands are selling for $1.50 to $5 an acre.
Well, what had happened after they confiscated the land? Land got expensive in the East because they had actually an English system that a lot of them followed, where the oldest boy got the farm. That put the other boys out.
And we had large families at that time.
And a lot of those boys had to move. Not that they did, but in some cases they followed the English law.
And it was the farm, truly we were farmers. Most of us were farmers at that time, with a few storekeepers.
Agriculture was the main thing, other than a few merchants in town.
Well, let's talk about how Enos described Clarkston. It says, we should take into consideration the relative situation of both parcels. The one is under a good state of cultivation with necessary orchards, and C, the other is in a state of nature, which it will take years of toil and hardship to bring under the same state of cultivation as the farm you now possess. So he obviously saw that some of this was going to take a long time. And then the next piece is very interesting too. He describes where the land is, which is the 12 miles northwest of Pontiac, or 4 miles from Clarkston. He calls Clarkston the nearest place of any business. And there is at the last place, which he means Clarkston, a grist mill, a sawmill, and a leveling machine all in operation. I'm not sure, we have to talk about a leveling machine. And a meeting house enclosed, which I would assume was a church.
No, they actually had a house.
Oh, okay.
They had a small amount of people. There was certain pioneers, Davis and others, who were part of that beginning of the community, even before Clarkston was created.
Okay.
And by the way, Joseph Van Sickle came from New Jersey, Independence, New Jersey. He was a part of that group, and he got him to name our township as Independence.
Okay.
And that wasn't until about 1838.
Okay.
Before that, it was town, as I said before.
Town
it was
4.
noted as a township number.
4.
But when the early pioneers, when they got here, there was a lot of wood. So what did they do? They would cut trees, enough trees that they could plant potatoes. The first thing they did was plant potatoes because they didn't have to pull the stumps. They could plant those potatoes between
around
them, and they could
trees,
plant their garden between those. Now, the first thing they did was they'd build they needed shelter. So they would build a pole shack, and that would be not a log cabin, it'd be something simpler, because it might have been a single man trying to build his own house. And he could only handle lightweight timber. I said lumber.
Timber. Yeah.
But anyway, when later on, with 2 men, you could build a log house.
Okay. Now we have a picture of Enos Church, who was the son of Elizabeth and the owner of your property. Enos was a blacksmith here in Clarkston.
Well, I could give you another history on Enos.
Okay, talk about Enos.
Okay, Enos came here, I believe, in the 1820s.
Okay.
He first went to Dexter.
Okay.
Because his oldest son was born in Dexter in 1839. And he was a son of a Seth church and Elizabeth Nichols church. So that Elizabeth was, her main name was Nichols. And then, well, anyway, Allen Church happened to fall on my land, which was bad. He didn't even build a house. He sold it right away, and he moved to Pontiac Township over by south of where the Dodge Estate is, and he bought some flat land.
Okay, that was called the Amy.
Amy, but now here's the thing.
At the time.
But Enos was also at first in Amy. After he left Dexter, he went to Amy.
And Amy would be Auburn Hills.
Auburn Hills. He built a hotel.
Oh, he built a hotel?
He built a hotel there. And he stayed there till about 1840. And then he came to Clarkston. And I don't have a lot of proof that he actually lived out at the farm at all. He owned it.
He owned the property, but and he was really scouting this property for his mother.
Yes, but also his brothers, because he had a brother Samuel and a brother Benjamin and Alan, and they all took the land. Now also Benjamin, he didn't like this place either. He went up to Tuscola County within a couple of years.
Okay.
So it didn't take long before they decided, I don't want to move all these rocks. It's too much work.
Well, Enos has some other notoriety though. He lived in town. He was a blacksmith when he was here in Clarkston.
He's also a JP.
Justice of the Peace,
Yes.
and he
Top
also
supervisor.
He was supervisor also, and then he was a member of the Masonic Lodge, and he's also known as being the ghost of the Masonic Lodge.
Ghost of the Masonic. Well, his picture hangs up in the Masonic. A huge picture of Enos is up there.
Yeah. So, so he described this land and the wild lands, and so yours was part of the nature, probably the part of the nature. So his mother purchased this land, and you've described it as hilly and rocky, and you talked about the potato farming that went on. But he didn't live on the land, and then his mother passed away in 1853, so she wasn't even here very long.
Yeah, she wasn't here too. No, that's true. She's buried at the cemetery up here
Lakeville.
in Lakeville.
Okay. So let's kind of fast forward to about 1856 and tell us about what happens on the land then.
56?
Well, there's a log cabin and...
Oh, okay. Later on, are you saying 56?
Well, but yes.
Well, let me just...
I believe you told me that there was a log cabin on the land in 56, and then 62 was another sale to Henry Fitch.
Yes. There was a log cabin built by Fitch, I believe.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure he built it.
And tell us about the remains, or what you know about that log cabin on your land.
Well, he built it on top of the hill. They were very smart in that direction. They tried to make sure that they played their cabin on a higher level, because there were no basements and things. They wanted the water to drain away. There were no foundations and such. And I have evidence of him being there. Bottles and old lamp parts and everything along the edge of the property.
Okay.
Another interesting thing, I can see where their first fences were rails, where they would have a crisscross. You've probably seen this, like a V-shapes. I have evidence out there where that fence was, because the rocks are still in the V-shape. They took the rocks off the field, they put them against the fence. Now the fence is gone, but you can see where the fence was.
But the rocks are the outline of the rocks.
The rocks show you the outline.
And Mr. Fitch, churches were still selling, because some of this land became part of the church family. It was in the will was given to many of the church family members.
No, what do you say, the will?
Mrs. Church's
Oh yeah,
will.
she broke it into 5 parts. Now, Matthew did keep one part where the log cabin was for a while, but then later he transferred it, to the family. In fact, they even had his name mentioned in their will as owning something there.
Okay.
They wanted to make sure that he got that. That was kind of his request.
So the next interesting people on that land maybe were Thomas and Hugh Watson?
Yes, they were from Ohio. They were Civil War. Both of them were Civil War vets. And Thomas was the older one. He was wounded at Chancellorsville. And when they came here, they bought that farm. Their mother lived with them also. Now, Hugh Watson, the one brother, he married a girl up in Brandon Township, about a mile up the road. And I got her name, but I don't have it handy.
Well, you married people that were really close to you, because you were either walking or riding your horse. That's as far as you went.
Anyway, so he left Thomas and the widow, his mother, on the farm.
And moved on.
And then they moved on.
Then the house, well, it was interesting with Thomas and Hugh Watson. Both of those were prisoners of war. They were captured at...
The only one that I know of, I'm not sure that they're both...
but at
I do know
Chancellorsville?
Thomas was captured.
Okay. It's 1889. the house that you live in today was built. Is that correct?
That's correct, and it happened to be built by Dan Scatting. Dan Scatting in 1850.
Tell us about his history.
Okay. He was from Ireland, a young man. He lived with Nelson Clark in town. You can see him in the 1850 census. Anyway, he bought part of the land out there on my section. Then he built the house. He built the house and the barn and the garage.
And you know this because there's a special little...
Well, it's in my basement. We did some remodeling. And off the wall, I found this board with Scatting written on it in pencil, of course, pencil. So that's a token that I know he built that. That's why his name was on that board. But he didn't really stay there. Very briefly, because in a short period, he resold to William and Ida Pierce.
Okay, we're going to talk about them, but I believe you had told me that besides the house, there was, what other outbuildings were there?
Only the garage and the barn, outhouse, of course.
Yeah, okay.
If necessary. And that was it.
But the barn that we see in your picture was built in 1889.
At the same time as the house.
So it's 36 years old.
26 years old, yeah. Okay.
Sorry. So let's talk about the Crosses, because we have a picture of Mrs. Cross's family home, which was on Reese Road.
Yes, actually that property was strange. Instead of running north and south, it ran all the way, the Cross property ran all the way from Reese Road to Allen Road.
Okay.
Now, they were related. Now, actually, I made Ida was not, she was a Galligan.
Okay.
And the Galligans was married with the Crosses, Moses Cross.
So that was a pretty prominent house, though, the Cross house.
It's a very prominent house.
Prominent house,
it was
yeah.
a wood house, and later, well, maybe 10, 15 years ago, it was re-bricked. It's a beautiful house right now.
Yeah, it's still there, and probably if you were walking from Reese Road straight through, you would come to your house. I would assume it's
pretty close and across, yeah.
Okay. So, talk a little bit about Ida. Ida Cross had a really interesting job.
Well, first, I should mention, that whole area they called Oak Hill.
Okay.
And there was an Oak Hill post office at the corner of Reese and Oak Hill.
And that building still stands today. It was within a home.
Yes, it was still there. Across the street was the Oak Hill School.
And that was really across Oak Hill
This was
Road,
in Brandon, actually.
Yeah.
Brandon, the corner of Reese and Oak Hill.
Almost another little four corners kind of thing.
Yes, it was. It was on the northwest corner. Now, a lot of people that went to that school were not from, they were from Groveland, they were from Independence and Brandon.
Because remember, it was 4 miles into town at the time, and
it was right on the line, and that was actually School District 1 at that time, back in those days. Now, Ida went to that school. Among many of the people in that corridor, conduit, went to that school.
Well, it was just right up the road from her.
Yes, that's where they went to school.
But tell us about her job, or her profession, I guess is what I want to say.
Well, you mean after they retired?
It's an adult, yeah, well, yes. When she...
Well, no, actually, I don't think it was his wife. That was his... Let me back up a little bit, because Devlin Pierce bought the farm that was built by Warner.
Okay.
And he lived there until about 1867 or so. He bought it in 67. His son was born there, in that log cabin. And then later, his son was William Pierce, who bought my place in 1889.
Okay.
When they died, Beardsley's moved in, another family moved in.
But Ida was she had a maternity house.
Well, no, those were sisters of Bill. He had Ida and Ada.
Okay.
Now, one of them, one married to Mills, and he died, so the two sisters moved together into that, what they called home.
Maternity
home.
home.
They had a couple of different names for it. Bedding, they called it a bedding home, and different things. And Dr. Sutherland used to have all his
Deliver the
deliveries
babies.
there at that particular home.
Because it was a long way into Pontiac to, which was, I think, the early beginnings of what was North Oakland Hospital at the time, or currently at North Oakland, or
well, you were either
General
born,
Hospital.
You were either born at home or you were born in a place like
Yeah.
that. Now, that was easy for them to do it. The doctor didn't have to go. They'd go to that home before they delivered their baby and stayed there while they had that baby.
So Horgers, the home was sold to Horgers in the 1940s.
Bill retired in 1940.
Okay.
He moved into town on Holcomb Street.
We're talking about the crosses.
Pardon?
We're talking about the crosses?
No, Bill Pierce.
Okay.
Bill Pierce. He moved into town after he
Okay.
retired, and he 150 on Holcomb Road, just south of Miller Road there and Holcomb. And then he stayed there till he died.
So, but the home in the 1940s was sold to Horgers, is that correct?
He sold it to a lady, a widow named Horker.
Okay.
And after a while, they were kind of poor. They couldn't even hardly afford payments. And so he allowed them to sell a lot of the land and build a smaller house.
Okay.
They built a smaller house down the road and a smaller lot.
So in the 1940s, the house, it had an outhouse, or a three-hole outhouse, and it had a windmill.
Oh, yes.
And
Well, of course, all your water was windmill.
Okay, well, let's explain that to our audience.
All right. Well, at that time, that's the way you got your water, with a windmill, because our wells were maybe 40 foot deep or so. They didn't have pumps or electricity. They pumped the water up into the kitchen into a tank over the sink. Then they could gravity flow that water to the sink once they pumped it to the tank. Another thing they did, they kept all the water off the roof because that was soft water.
And put that in a cistern?
They brought that down an eavesdrop into a cistern in the basement. Now that had a pump in that they could also pump from the sink. When they wanted to do dishes or wash their hands or take a bath, they used the soft water.
Okay, which was really rainwater.
Rainwater, of course.
So now we're kind of up to 1947, which Chester Dixon bought the house. And
Okay, Chester Dixon had a business, and he was in a plumbing business.
okay,
His business was on Dixie Highway, the other side of Telegraph. And so he modernized the home. He took out the coal furnace, and he put in a oil furnace with plumbing,
Okay.
hot water. He had
Okay.
all the copper, so it was radiant heat.
Okay.
He did the house completely.
hot water heat
Hot water heat.
plus water.
A boiler, such. He also put in the septic system and made a bathroom in the house. Until that time, there was no inside bathroom.
So a little less than 70 years ago. A little less
At
than
that
70.
time,
And you told me that your well in 1963, when you bought that house, was 60 foot deep.
Yes, what it was what they call a jack pump. It was an old crank type pump with a motor on it with a belt. The belt kept breaking, and it was always leaking. And so I finally gave up on it, and I had to put in a deep well sump pump, which is now much deeper.
Okay. So is it 100 feet? Did you tell me?
Now, gosh, I'm closer to 200 feet.
Okay.
Because what happened, first I was down to 160 feet. Other people, when they built, the water table went down, and I had to go down again lower.
Okay. Well, I think we have some pictures of the house in 1963 when you bought it. It's very different than what it is today. Was the rock the rock on the sun porch or the porch?
No, that was added by, I believe, probably by Dixon's.
Okay, but but it was a pretty ambitious house for 1889, and by this time it was 50 58 years old. And I especially look at especially look at those trees because we've got another picture of the farm was called
Mapleside
Farm. And
Pierce planted 3 trees in line in front of the house, and 2 of them are already broken down because of age, and I have 1 left, which is probably going to have to be taken down.
I think we have that picture of that tree. So how old do you think that tree would be?
Well, they would be 100 years old.
Okay. So that's at least that's a picture of.
Yes, that's about right for a 100-year-old tree.
Okay. And so then you have moved in 1963. Talk to us about some of the things that you've done to this house.
Well, of course, I made an addition, I remodeled the bathroom and the kitchen, and I've re-roofed the barn.
I know you just re-roofed had the barn re-roofed. It's one of the best specimens of the barn. You just had that done this summer, and it's a beautiful barn. We've got pictures of that too. Yeah. But when you look at these houses, that as you go along the roads of Independence Township or any other area, there's a real history to these houses. And so you can see the roof on that barn right there. You've really taken care of, as a historian, you've really taken care of the history of that home and of that barn. And we really appreciate.
Well, I love barns. I was involved in the barn tours in the town, and this barn was on the barn tour.
Okay. Well, we really appreciate having you today.
Is it
and
are we there?
Yes, we're there. And is there anything else you want to say about your home, or giving people ideas about looking for their information for their?
Well, what I would like to do then, I could tell them people what I would do if they were interested in research. Let me just find they got some information here that I wanted to tell them about. If they would go to their library, here, they would get information. But if they wanted to find out about their house, they should go to the Register of Deeds in Pontiac, down on
Oakland County Register of
Oakland
Deeds.
County, yes. You can go in there, and they've got all the books of the county by section number. Like it might be from like section 6 to 8. Pull that book out, take it, lay it down on a table, and you can search all the history of your place. Now, then what you do, you ask the girl if there's certain Lieber numbers and book numbers that you'd like. They will copy them for you and send them to you. Another thing you can do, they've got death records there. If you wanted to find something about someone that lived there, you're tracing a family.
And that's what you've done with your home, is all of the all of the people who have lived there over the years. You have sort of a history of those people.
I got every deed there to create my own book and create my history, because I didn't have an abstract.
Well, you're a great caretaker of one of the oldest houses in the township. And if people are interested in some of the oldest houses in the township, if you go to the library website, on the library website is a inventory that was done in the 1990s on the oldest homes in the township, not the city, but the township. And a little information about them, and your home is on there, is part of it, but they're all, it's electronically on the website, and it's a great thing to have that history, because some of those homes are no longer here. Other buildings have been there, or whatever. So thank you very much for watching Clarkston Memories, and stay tuned. We'll have more about the history of Clarkston in years to come, and always remember that we're affiliated with Clarkston Historical Society, and they are working to maintain the history of the village and the township. Thank you very much.
Thank you.